The universe would never be the same. The cargo ship drifted silently through the vast emptiness of space, its hull scarred and weathered from countless interstellar journeys. Inside the cramped control room, Jake Wilson leaned back in his chair, nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. He was a typical human freight operator, unremarkable by most galactic standards, but possessing a certain stubborn creativity that would soon change everything. A sharp beeping interrupted his thoughts. The ship's proximity alarm was flashing an urgent red. Jake squinted at the display, his calloused fingers tapping a sequence of commands that brought the sensor data into focus. Something was approaching, something that didn't match any standard galactic registry. "Computer," he called out, "run a full-spectrum analysis on the incoming object." The ship's artificial intelligence responded in its usual monotone. "Unidentified biological entity detected. Composition, organic matter. Size, approximately 0.5 meters. Threat assessment, unknown." Jake's eyebrow raised. In his 20 years of shipping cargo across multiple star systems, he'd seen his fair share of strange things. But this was different. Most ships would have initiated defensive protocols or attempted to evade. Not Jake. He was curious. The object drew closer. On most alien vessels, this would be cause for alarm. Shields would activate. Weapons would charge. But Jake did something entirely unexpected. He opened the cargo bay doors. As the massive metal barriers slowly parted, Jake grabbed a standard-issue containment kit. It was a simple set of tools, mostly designed for collecting soil samples or capturing small specimens during planetary surveys. Nothing fancy. Nothing special. Nothing, except in the hands of a human. The object floated in. From a distance, it looked like nothing more than a clump of organic matter. Tentacle-like appendages hung limply. Its surface was a mottled gray-green, pulsing with what seemed like a life of its own. To most species in the galaxy, this would be a nightmare scenario, an unknown biological entity potentially carrying unknown risks. To Jake, it looked like a problem that needed solving. "All right," he muttered to himself, "let's see what you're made of." The next few moments would become legendary, a story whispered in spaceports and trading stations across multiple star systems. A tale that would fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed humanity's approach to unexpected challenges. Jake approached the entity with a calm that would have impressed even the most stoic alien observers. Where others might see a threat, he saw an opportunity. Where most would retreat, he moved forward. Little did the unknown organism know, it had just encountered the most dangerous species in the universe, not because humans were the strongest, or the most technologically advanced, but because they possessed something far more terrifying. Creativity. Adaptability. And an absolutely ruthless problem-solving instinct. The first contact had been made. And nothing would ever be the same again. As the ship's lights cast long shadows across the cargo bay, Jake Wilson smiled, a smile that would have sent chills down the spine of any intelligent life form watching. This was going to be interesting. 12 hours after the mysterious entity's arrival, Jake Wilson had transformed the cargo bay into something between a laboratory and a war room. Portable screens flickered with data streams. Specialized containment units hummed with soft electronic pulses. And at the center of it all sat the unknown organism, now carefully secured and monitored. The ship's computer had been working non-stop, running analysis after analysis. But Jake knew computers only told part of the story. He needed to understand this thing on a deeper level. "Computer," he called out, "run comprehensive molecular breakdown. Cross-reference with known biological databases." A series of complex diagrams appeared on the main screen. The organism was unlike anything in the standard galactic archives. It didn't match any known species. No recorded genetic markers. No identifiable cellular structure that fit existing scientific understanding. Most ship captains would have immediately contacted Galactic authorities. Most would have initiated quarantine protocols. Most would have been terrified. Jake Wilson was not most people. He rolled up his sleeves and grabbed a modified electron microscope, a tool he'd jury-rigged during a long cargo run 3 years ago. Where other species saw barriers, humans saw opportunities for creative solutions. The microscope revealed something extraordinary. The organism wasn't just a single entity. It was a complex network of interconnected microorganisms. Each tiny segment appeared to have its own rudimentary intelligence. Like a living puzzle, constantly shifting and reorganizing. Interesting, Jake muttered. Most scientists would have spent months, perhaps years, studying such a discovery. They would have written research papers, held conferences, debated theories. Jake Wilson was going to solve this problem before breakfast. He pulled out a standard decontamination kit, designed for sterilizing cargo holds after potentially dangerous biological encounters. But Jake saw it differently. Where the kit was meant for defense, he saw an offensive tool. The first test mixture was simple. A combination of industrial-grade cleaning agents, modified with a protein compound Jake had developed during a previous cargo run. He'd originally created it to prevent fungal growth in long-term storage containers. Now, it might become something entirely different. As the solution touched the first sample of the organism, something remarkable happened. The microorganisms didn't just die. They began to react. Changing. Adapting. Most species would have been alarmed. Jake was fascinated. "Computer," he said, "record all reactions. Prepare secondary and tertiary test solutions." The next few hours became a dance of scientific improvisation. Jake wasn't just studying the organism. He was engaging with it. Challenging it. Pushing its limits in ways no other species would have considered. Each test revealed something new. The organism could rapidly mutate. It could redistribute its cellular structure to avoid complete destruction. It was, in many ways, the perfect survivor. But humans had a way of redefining what survival meant. By the time the ship's chronometer marked the end of the standard work cycle, Jake had compiled more data than most research teams would gather in a decade. He hadn't just analyzed the organism. He was beginning to understand it. And understanding, for humans, was always the first step towards solving a problem. The cargo bay hummed with potential. The unknown entity continued its subtle movements, unaware that it had encountered a species more adaptable and inventive than anything in the known universe. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, something fundamental was about to change. The alarm came unexpectedly. Jake Wilson had been running his 17th test sequence when the ship's communication system crackled to life. Most ships used sophisticated quantum communication networks. This was an old-fashioned emergency broadcast, the kind that cut through all other signals. "Cargo vessel Delta 97, a mechanical voice announced, you are entering restricted space. Immediate identification and clearance required." Jake barely looked up from his work. The organism, which he'd started calling the puzzle in his notes, was displaying fascinating mutation patterns. Each test revealed new layers of complexity. The communication system repeated its message. More insistent this time. Acknowledged, Jake responded casually, his eyes still fixed on the microscopic changes happening in the containment unit. Most pilots would have been nervous. Restricted space meant potential military encounters. Potential confrontations. Potential destruction. Jake Wilson saw an opportunity. The ship's exterior sensors began tracking an approaching vessel. Sleek. Angular. Definitely not human design. The communication system switched to a visual interface. A creature appeared, humanoid, but distinctly alien. Multiple eyes. Skin that shifted colors like a living camouflage. Identify your cargo and purpose, the alien demanded. Jake smiled. A smile that would have made most alien species extremely uncomfortable. Scientific research, he responded simply. The alien's multiple eyes narrowed. Humans were not known for scientific research. They were known for trade. For commerce. For occasional military interventions. But pure scientific curiosity? That was unexpected. Scanning your vessel, the alien announced. Most human ships would have immediately blocked such a scan. Would have raised shields. Prepared defensive systems. Jake did nothing. The scan completed. And for the first time in the conversation, the alien looked confused. Your cargo hold contains an unclassified biological entity, the alien stated. It wasn't a question. It was an observation. Correct, Jake responded. You are transporting a potential contamination risk, the alien continued. Its voice carried a mix of concern and something else. Something that might have been respect. Jake's fingers continued to type notes about the puzzle. He was only half listening to the conversation. I'm studying it, he said simply. The alien's color-shifting skin began to pulse in patterns that suggested intense calculation. Most species would have seen this as a threat display. Jake saw it as communication. Our records show no prior human engagement with unknown biological entities, the alien said. Your species typically avoids direct contact with unidentified organisms. Jake looked up for the first time. Made direct eye contact with the alien. We're adaptable, he said. The word hung in the communication space. Adaptable. Such a simple word. But in the context of human interaction with the unknown, it meant something more. It meant everything. The alien's communication feed went silent for several moments. Processing. Analyzing. Trying to understand the human before it. Jake returned to his work. The puzzle continued its fascinating molecular dance. Shifting. Changing. Responding to each carefully crafted test. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, a fundamental understanding was shifting. Humans weren't just another species. They were something else entirely. A problem-solving force that defied conventional galactic expectations. The alien finally spoke again. We will require a full report of your findings. Jake didn't look up. Sure, he said simply. And just like that, another layer of galactic interaction was rewritten. 3 days after the alien encounter, everything changed. Jake Wilson hadn't slept. The cargo bay had transformed into a makeshift laboratory that would have impressed even the most advanced research stations in the galaxy. Screens covered every wall. Containment units hummed with complex monitoring equipment. And at the center of it all sat the puzzle, no longer just an unknown organism, but something far more intriguing. The breakthrough came at 0300 hours, ship time. Most scientists would have missed it. The change was subtle. Microscopic. A molecular shift so small that standard sensors would have overlooked it completely. But Jake's modified equipment caught everything. The puzzle was communicating. Not in any way anyone would recognize as communication. No language. No obvious signals. But a pattern of molecular reorganization that suggested something beyond random mutation. Something deliberate. Jake's fingers flew across the keyboard. Recording. Analyzing. Connecting dots that no one else would have seen. The ship's computer struggled to keep up. Molecular restructuring detected, it announced. Pattern deviation, 99.7% from previous observations. Most researchers would have been cautious. Would have paused. Consulted colleagues. Waited for confirmation. Jake Wilson was not most researchers. He reached for a specialized interface, a device he'd cobbled together from spare parts during a long cargo run 2 years ago. Part communication array. Part molecular stimulator. Entirely unique. As the device touched the containment unit, something extraordinary happened. The puzzle responded. Not with aggression. Not with defense. But with what could only be described as curiosity. Its molecular structure began to shift. Not randomly. Not in a pattern of survival or attack. But in a way that suggested, impossibly, communication. Jake's eyes widened. Computer, he called out, run comparative analysis. Cross-reference with all known communication protocols. The screens exploded with data. Patterns. Connections. Possibilities that defied everything known about biological communication. The alien vessel that had encountered Jake earlier was still within long-range sensors. They were watching. Waiting. Confused by the humans' approach. Humans were supposed to be straightforward. Direct. Focused on trade and conflict. This was something else entirely. As dawn broke across the artificial lighting of the cargo ship, Jake Wilson made a discovery that would change everything humans understood about life in the universe. The puzzle wasn't just an organism. It was trying to communicate. And humans, with their unique blend of creativity, persistence, and absolute refusal to accept impossible, were the first species capable of listening. The universe was about to get very interesting. The research station orbited a distant moon, a massive construct that represented the pinnacle of galactic scientific collaboration. Dozens of species worked together, each bringing their unique perspective to the greatest mysteries of the universe. They were about to learn that humans played by different rules. Jake Wilson's cargo ship docked with clinical precision. Most pilots would have been nervous. Intimidated by the massive complex. Worried about protocols and permissions. Jake brought coffee. The station's reception area was a marvel of alien engineering. Gravity modulators. Atmospheric converters. Communication systems that could translate between 1,000 different languages. None of them were prepared for Jake Wilson. "I'm here about the puzzle," he announced to the first official he encountered. A being composed of what seemed like living crystal, with communication tendrils that shifted color with each thought. The crystal being paused. Processed. Analyzed. Identification protocols require, it began. Jake interrupted. Not rudely. Not aggressively. Simply with the certainty of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. "I've got something you're going to want to see," he said. Most visitors would have been escorted to waiting areas. Processed through layers of bureaucracy. Questioned. Analyzed. Jake was already walking towards the main research wing. The containment unit holding the puzzle looked like nothing special. A simple transparent container. Sensors running constant monitoring. But Jake knew better. This was no ordinary specimen. "I need a full research team," he told the station's lead scientist. A tall, spider-like creature with multiple neural processing clusters. The scientist's appendages moved in a pattern of confusion. "Standard protocol requires." "I know," Jake interrupted again. "But this isn't a standard discovery." What happened next would become legendary in scientific circles. Jake began to explain how the puzzle communicated. Not through language. Not through traditional biological signals. But through molecular restructuring that suggested a form of intelligence far beyond anything previously understood. The research station went silent. Most species would have been skeptical. Would have demanded proof. Would have spent months, years, analyzing every minute detail. Humans worked differently. Within hours, Jake had assembled a team. Not through official channels. Not through bureaucratic processes. but through sheer force of personality and the undeniable evidence he presented. The puzzle began to change. As if it knew it was being truly observed for the first time. Molecular structures shifted. Patterns emerged that defied every known principle of biological communication. It wasn't just adapting. It was responding. To humans. The alien scientists watched in a mixture of horror and fascination. Humans weren't just another species in the galactic community. They were something else entirely. A force of nature that rewrote the rules of scientific discovery. As the first day of research concluded, one thing became crystal clear. The universe had never encountered anything quite like humanity. And it was about to get a very interesting lesson. Humans redefine pest control, the universe wasn't ready. Part 6, The Unexpected Solution. 48 hours after Jake Wilson's arrival, the research station was in chaos. The puzzle had become something entirely different. No longer just an unknown organism, it was now a subject of intense fascination and growing concern. Multiple alien species watched in a mixture of terror and awe as Jake continued his unconventional research. "It's adapting," he explained to a group of bewildered scientists. "But not like anything we've seen before." The molecular structure of the puzzle had begun to change at an unprecedented rate. Where most organisms would break down under intense study, this one was evolving. Learning. Responding to every test, every probe, every attempt to understand it. The station's primary research director, a being composed of interconnected neural networks, approached Jake with what could only be described as concern. "Your methods are unprecedented," the director stated. Not a compliment. Not a criticism. Simply an observation. Jake didn't even look up from his work. "Humans solve problems differently," he responded. "Most scientific teams would have isolated the organism. Contained it. Treated it as a potential threat. Jake was treating it like a puzzle to be solved. His approach was simple yet revolutionary. Instead of trying to control the organism, he was trying to communicate with it. Not through traditional means. Not through language or standard communication protocols. But through understanding. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. During a routine molecular analysis, Jake noticed something extraordinary. The puzzle wasn't just responding to external stimuli. It was actively trying to communicate. Its molecular structure began to form patterns that suggested something far more complex than simple survival. It was learning. "Computer," Jake called out, "run comparative analysis. Cross-reference molecular patterns with known communication systems." The screens erupted with data. Patterns. Connections. Possibilities that defied everything known about biological communication. The alien scientists watched in a mixture of horror and fascination. Humans were supposed to be straightforward. Direct. Focused on trade and conflict. This was something else entirely. As the station's sensors tracked the puzzle's transformation, Jake made a discovery that would change everything humans understood about life in the universe. The organism wasn't a threat. It was a solution. To what, nobody yet knew. But humans, with their unique blend of creativity, persistence, and absolute refusal to accept the impossible, were about to find out. The universe was about to get very interesting. And Jake Wilson was leading the way. The final moment of discovery came without warning. Jake Wilson stood at the center of the research station's primary laboratory. Around him, alien scientists watched with a mixture of terror and anticipation. The puzzle had transformed completely. What had started as an unknown organism was now something entirely different. "It's not a threat," Jake said simply. "It's a solution." The lead scientist, a being of complex neural networks, struggled to understand. Solution to what? Jake's smile was something between triumph and understanding. The puzzle had revealed its true nature. It wasn't an organism. It wasn't an invasion. It was a universal problem-solving mechanism. A biological technology so advanced that it defied every known principle of scientific understanding. And humans were the first to recognize it. Where other species saw a potential threat, Jake saw potential. Where others would have destroyed or contained the organism, he had chosen to understand it. The molecular structure began to stabilize. Patterns emerged that suggested something far beyond simple biological function. It was a system. A network. A way of solving problems that transcended individual species. "We're going to change everything," Jake told the assembled scientists. The research station went silent. Humans were about to redefine what it meant to solve problems in the universe. The puzzle was no longer just an organism. It was a key. A key to understanding how life could adapt. How intelligence could evolve. How different species could communicate and solve challenges beyond their individual capabilities. As the final molecular pattern settled, one thing became crystal clear. The universe had just met its most dangerous problem solvers. And nothing would ever be the same again.